Okay, now let's come back to that really pertinent question. So there's no direct link. You can't find the exact hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says, go to the grave of a pious person and make dua there. But it's deduced. And there's a number of things that we do and don't think are problematic, but based on the same principle. And I'll try to show you an example now. And the example is that of communal iftars in Ramadan, where you invite people together in a mosque for community iftar. Let's look at an example. I've got a table there, I don't know if you can see it. Let's just look at this. It says issue here, and then it says community iftar, going to a grave to make dua. Let's just look at this table, this column first. Inshallah, hopefully it makes you understand this better. Hadith. Is there any hadith about community iftars? The only hadith we can find, as far as I know, is virtue of providing food for opening the fast. I don't think we need to discuss that. That's well known. Opening somebody's fast, giving them food, is a virtuous act. There are hadith which says from the Prophet ﷺ that it's a good thing to make an invite for everybody and ask them to come to the masjid and open their iftar, or gather together for iftar. Or was this the practice in Medina Munawwara, that they used to get all the companions together to have iftari at the masjid, at their meal, break their fast, pray, and then come back and everybody eats there? Was that the practice in Medina Munawwara? Was that the practice of the companions? No, it wasn't. I'm not saying that there's a problem. We have no problems with it. For us, it's not a problem. For the Salafi school, it's a big problem. Okay, practice of the companions, not reported in this exact same manner. There's no hadith that I know of, or report that I know from the companions, where they said they gathered people together for iftari in the masjid. I'm not aware of any. I tried to look, I can't find any. It might exist, but I'm not aware of any. That doesn't exist. There's no specific prohibition either. There's no hadith which says that it's haram for people to gather in the mosque and make iftar. Okay? Likewise, the companions, they went out from Medina Munawwara to other places and gave da'wah in non-Muslim lands. Did they do communal iftars? Did they say, we've got non-Muslim neighbors, let's invite them for iftari? They didn't do that. That's fine, it's not a problem for us. But that's not an evidence to say that something's haram. But what's the ruling? Practice and rulings of Muslim scholars, good and encouraged. Good encouraged, what is good and encouraged? To have a community iftar. Even though there is no direct hadith and no direct practice of the Salaf. Both are missing. There's general, what is there? There's general hadith about feeding iftar. General hadith about giving da'wah, etc. But let's talk about iftar. I don't talk about the da'wah aspect, right? So, communal iftar. There's no direct hadith that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged the companions to do as a congregation, as a group, or the companions did it. That doesn't stop it, according to our scholars, as being good. That doesn't matter, because the general principle is there. It's good to people to open a person's fast, whether it's an individual or whether it's a group, as long as there's no kind of belief around it that you have to do it as a group, or if you don't do it as a group, or it has to be on a certain day. If it's general, then alhamdulillah, it's fine. It's not a problem for us. Now that's the example for communal iftar. You just take that example and you just apply that to going to a grave to make dua of a grave of a blessed person to make dua, and it matches up exactly the same. The Prophet ﷺ taught dua for self when visiting graves. We covered that. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that you should make dua for yourself when you go to a grave. It's not just about deceased people. Then hadith, pious people are blessed, the hadith of dhikr. Then it says hadith, company of the blessed impacts on those in the vicinity, dua in blessed places answered. All of these tell us that pious people, you can make dua for yourself in a graveyard. Pious people's graves are blessed. Pious people are blessed, therefore where they're buried is blessed. Therefore, if you make a dua there, it has more likelihood of being answered. Practice of the companions. Did the companions go? They went to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. We covered that in the last lecture. They did go to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. But people will say, well, that's the Prophet ﷺ. I want you to talk about companions. Did companions go to the graves of other companions? It's not reported in this exact same manner. But there's no specific prohibition either. Added to that is, we just mentioned, I don't know how many examples from Islamic history of where Muslim scholars regard it as okay. Therefore, it's good and encouraged. That's what our scholars say. Scholars of Sunni madhabs. We mentioned the Hanafi reference and a Hanbali reference. So there you see the examples of that. Okay? So you take two issues. For some people, communal iftar is not a problem. Even though they can't give you a hadith, they can't give you a practice of the Salaf. They can't give you it. But they still seem to think it's okay. When you mention this, same level of evidence, you might say perhaps even more, they say it's a bid'ah. Can you see that there? I don't know whether that table helps you try to break it down. There's two similar issues where people come to two different conclusions. One is bid'ah, one isn't. And it is a problem for the Salafi school. Why? Because one of their scholars at least says that communal iftars are bid'ah. Sheikh Saleh Al-Fawzan, we mentioned him before. Some neighbors, this was a question asked him, some neighbors during Ramadan organize a collective iftar in the masjid with the intention of strengthening ties between them. What does your Excellency, Fadila, I don't know how you translate that, but Excellency, say about this? Answer, this is something that the Salaf did not do. They did not intend gathering for iftar in Ramadan, no other than it. Then he goes on to say, as for if the objective of collective iftari in the masjid is that they provide iftar for poor people and the needy, so somewhere that poor people can come and get the iftar and present the iftar in the masjid. So if it's for poor people in the masjid, for the needy and the poor, then it is okay. As for if they only gather together themselves and say there is virtue in this, meaning virtue reward, they get reward for this, then it is not from the practice of the Salaf. So that's a problem. And to be honest, according to their principles, they have a problem with communal iftars. They can't give us a hadith, as far as I know, they can't give practice of the Salaf. If somebody has found evidence, then they should share it. But they're being true to their principles, they should be following this fatwa. They have other fatwas, I believe, that say it's okay. But when they're saying, any kind of reasoning they give, saying communal iftars are allowed, any reasoning they provide, we can also use that same reasoning for Mawlid then. Because they can't give us a hadith, they can't give us practice of the Salaf. Okay, so that's just the overview. So that's just saying you can use dua with that wording. Allah ask you by the rank of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah ask you by the rank of the pious. Allah by the rank and status of those who participated in Badr. Or Allah by the rank and status of the Shuhada of Badr. And then if there's a grave of a pious person, you can go there and make dua. Allah, I ask you by the rank and status of this pious person, or just make dua, just direct Allah. But it's a blessed place, the grave of the pious person. Obviously, it has to be a pious person as well. And the wording is open. Allah asks you by the closest person to you in the town of High Wycombe. So we have some students ask. One student asked at some lessons locally that who is the most pious people in High Wycombe. And he mentioned a few names, but I said nobody knows. It could be some old auntie who's bedridden, and in the eyes of Allah, she's the most pious person. It might be some young teenager who's very, very sincere, and Allah is closest to Allah. Nobody knows them. We don't know. Okay, it could be an old uncle who's prays in the mosque, just prays, goes home. They might be the biggest wali of High Wycombe. We just don't know this. Okay? So, the hidden slaves of Allah, hidden friends. So you may dua, Allah, by the most pious person in this town, I ask you to ease my difficulties. And Sunni scholars, it's permitted. So shall we pause there? That's one issue. So Sunni scholars say it's permitted, it's not bid'ah, it's permissible. Salafi scholars, it's bid'ah.